This is a talk about the book of Zygmunt Bauman and Tim May on how to think sociologically. And I've chosen it because it gives a lot of inspiration to whoever wants to understand society and life on its own terms. So to think sociologically, it's like thinking about society in a different way than you do when you just experience it. We are all bound to our lived world, the world of what we experience and do and who we meet and walk with and do some stuff with. But organizing all that outside of yourself, it is existing and trying to understand how it works as a net of complicated relations out there that can sometimes become too big to understand, a jungle of institutions and relations, laws, and how people use economy and politics into that. It becomes too complex. And this is what sociology really wants to help us to understand. And I like this book because Zygmunt Bauman has this ability to, like in his other books, to make difficult issues relatively readable for the people who are acting and reading it. And so the book is about defining what it is we look into when we look into sociology. And so one of the questions he starts asking in the beginning of the book is the common sense of life almost sounds like sociology because it is what you are living right now. Yeah, you have already an idea of yourself, family, um, society around you, church and organizations, other kind of religions and temples, politics, economics, trade, production. You have already established an idea of all these things, and that's what we call common sense. It's something that everyone understands and have relation to or can relate to is existing out there around us, and we are interacting with these institutions. So we are individuals who are a part of a network of acting in society, and that brings something new out of the actions than if we weren't in those networks of actions. Those networks can be work related or family or kind of politically, economically. In a case of maybe it can be gender based, like a group of males or females meeting and working together. It can be organizations and what can you say, places where people meet for spare time activities. And so there can be many places where we interact, and that's what brings the idea of looking into how society works forward in this book. And I'm gonna try and go through the basic ideas in the book, starting by the introduction, where he tells us that, well, why is it important actually to look through the lenses of sociology when you are living? And at the same time, he's saying, wait a minute, don't think that because you're going to look at life through the lenses of sociology that life changes per se. It doesn't go out and just change, but it will give you an awareness and an understanding on how things might work and are working outside of your little sphere. He calls the lived world, or the world as we live it, because there is the world as we live it, and then there is the world outside us that is lived with or without us. Imagine yourself on a trip to to the moon or to Mars, like these astronauts who stranded on that shuttle, and they had like kind of a relation up there, but they were at the same time not really present at Earth. So did everything stand still in the life around them and what's going on? We can, in common sense, answer no. With it, it all went on. The shops opened, and the schools and people went to their work, and everything were just running in itself with or without these four astronauts. So how can that be? How can things run despite you not being there? And at the same time, they had created their own environment up there. It's very interesting to look into what four people can develop and maybe get into when they are stranded together in a very small space over a long time. And so these astronauts has actually just brought us a fresh case that I think some sociologists will look into and research and try to understand what happens actually between humans in such a small space. How do they organize? And what rules do they agree on? And what happens to them inside themselves? And how do they get that time where they are isolated and away from the others so they can have some time on their own? And in that manner, we come to understand a lot more about them than we would usually have done if they were just working into their own life in society, going to the space shuttle station and going back home. But at the same time, it gives us also a picture of sociology and how it is actually surrounding us with all its meaning, and how we actually, in the same way as these astronauts, imagine the world as a spaceship and we are on it. And so we relate to each other in it in small and large communities, and we organize politics and economics and trade, production, infrastructure, all those things that we need around us. And then we get these institutions that become alive and get their own life, because sometimes you go to a place where you just feel an alien, even though it is there for you. You can go to the municipality building or you can go into a school, and then you feel like, what are you doing here? You're trespassing. It's like they are a different entity altogether that has its own life and rules and way of being. And this is what sociology tries to look into. What about power structures and how we relate to them and how we relate to each other, and also economical structures and how they affect us and how we relate to them. So this is always a move between you as an individual and the society as an entity. It's kind of using the right words for things, and this is what sociology is about. It differs from common sense in using a certain terminology. It doesn't want just to throw any any word out, explaining a thing and then leaving it for another word. If they agree on saying like, this is called an institution, then this has a definition. You cannot go and call anything an institution. Like a supermarket is not an institution. So what makes it an institution? It has its own criteria, making it that institution, that people are gathered on a target and with a set of rules and laws that they have to follow to give a kind of service and public service into the reality that they are surrounded by. That sounds a lot like the people in the shop, but they are an organization and a trade organization, because they're organized around some kind of profit. Sometimes the lines can be blurred and you do not understand the big difference, but sociology is trying to give you these words you can use whenever you relate. So we have the world of being an individual acting in life, and you have your lived life, how you see things, how you experience them and go about doing things in them. This is you, and this is your way of being. And then you have the objective reality outside of you. There are entities in that reality. These entities can form a lot of, relations. And this is what sociology looks into. How do they relate, the one person to that entity, the small group to the larger group. They call it the minority and majority. And so how do all these things interact and work together and form these relational networks? And what happens when you cannot fit in? You become stigmatized and you become an outsider. And how is the life of an outsider? And how many people can be outsiders before they form a new community that becomes the majority? All these things are interesting in a point of view of sociology, because it's actually looking into the relation between how you use language and how you experience it, because everything out there is just how you experience it, and at the same time it is there on its own premises. As we said with the astronauts, whether you are here or on Mars, the school, the shop, the political entity, anything around you out there will be going on as long as there are humans forming a bond and understanding on running things and keeping them going. And of course, an institution or organization or any kind of entity, political or economical, can fall apart if the individuals do not support it anymore, or the pressure against it becomes too big. and so it crumbles from within. And that's also something sociology goes and looks into. What is it that actually kept this together? Was it the values, the power in it, the ideas, the mission, the people working in it, the significant persons who had relation to it? So what keeps it going, and what makes it falter, and what kind of renewal does it need? And then we are into the space of organization and leadership and institutional organization. And some have been looking into that from psychological and sociological perspectives to understand how they work and how they go on renewing themselves and becoming stronger and bigger, or maybe more solidified in the reality they have a relation to. It's a very interesting field in my eyes, and anyhow, it's a good stay with this book, so I like it, and so that's why I'm running through this. So sociology is related to a lot of fields out there. It is in many ways in a big relation to some of the major fields that surround us. First of all, the knowledge about humans, called anthropology, the knowledge about state and politics, the knowledge about the law, the jura, and the socio-political knowledge, the economics, the psychology, management, criminology, literature, geography, culture geography, history. All these, we know them from school, from our lives, but we have maybe not studied them, but we know what they are basically talking about, or most of them anyhow. And so sociology is related to all these, but has its very, very special and a certain look into things, that to look into that man-created world that only exists because of the action of humans. That's a beautiful thing, that sociology is looking into the man-created world that only exists because of the human action and human, activity. And so you are not looking into nature because it exists with or without your activity. And you are not looking into history because that's something that happened. But due to human activity, it's related. But it is what is there right now because of human activity. So politics, economics, study of the law and the courts of law, everything that's functioning around us, any agreements, trade, production, movement, buildings, institutions, entrepreneurs, all you can imagine and think of, criminality even, and prisons, can and must be studied by sociology. And big sociologist has been studying or trying to get around this field. Even suicide, the act of suicide has fascinated humans for centuries, and has been studied by several strong sociologists. And maybe I could talk about it one day because it has also had part of my life related to it, and also I was really trying to understand it some more specifically because of its psychological impact, but that's another talk. And so we have sociology telling us a bit about the humans in society and how they form networks of relation, and what's the impact of these networks and how do they sustain themselves or change. And it uses the language and the experience, and it uses a kind of empiric way of looking into how things work. So it's not just going to a place, like if you go and visit Congress or the Parliament or the King's Palace or a shop, a big mall, a board of members in a meeting of a big holding company, and then you look and you see, the kindergarten or the sports club, whatever you think of, the church, the mosque, the synagogue, the temple, whatever you think of. You cannot just in sociology go there, sit there, look around, and go out and write a thesis, say, well, now I know what's going on in there. You basically can if you have the enough knowledge and understanding of every detail in there, but basically and usually the humans do not. And that's why sociology becomes a tool to understand and observe. And by observing, it is not just looking and going out, as I said, it is observing in a certain way by using certain techniques to make sure that you are observing correctly, understanding the details, checking their relation, and not interfering in what's happening in them. So when you are observing, you cannot also interpret, and you must definitely not judge at the same time. And that's what makes sociology special, because you have to put yourself and your judgment out of it, and that is a difficult thing. And this is what also is part of Zygmunt Bauman's and Tim Mays' book here, to think sociologically, or to have a way of thinking about sociology. It is very difficult because the sociologists are also part of cultures, and in nature we are subjective in our way of being. We do not go about the world objectively, looking at them as if we were detached. We are not the aliens from Mars or from another planet looking into this very strange Earth we have never experienced, so we can give it an impression without being part of it. So everything we look into, the same goes for psychology, and history. Everything we look into is actually something we can we can like explain, but by explaining it, we can interfere with it, or we can use our structures of understanding, and we can use our experiences as we have had them. And so it's very easy to go wrong while observing something. So if you like temples, for instance, but do not like those capitalist board members because you have seen a movie a long time ago, and your dad has been talking to you about how egoistic and bad they are, and the movie maybe had a certain impression on you, and showed like these board members as these evil old people who are going about trying to misuse everyone. And so when you go there as a sociologist to want to observe, you'll get into trouble if you do not have certain techniques to distance yourself from all that, and to try and look at it on its premises and not as you want to see it or how you are prejudged to see things. And this is also part of sociology, to look into what is called human relations, society relations, and how cultures work, how cultures actually become agreeable to people, and the prejudices that we live on. Because if we need to be alive in a society, we cannot think about everything all the time. If I'm walking out on the road, I cannot at every time I walk out start analyzing how this road came to be, and who worked on it, and who paid for it, and why the law was made, and so on and so on. I have to accept that once I've already put this internally in my mental structures as something that is there, and I maybe once read into it how it works and how the roads come to be, and the name of the roads, then I don't think about it anymore, and it becomes part of my internal structure of routines that makes me go on in life without being disturbed and without all the time stopping up. And that's what we also do in human relations and towards cultures. And he's going to talk about this. This is very interesting, and I like this topic very much, partly because I am a stigmatized person and from a minority culture and still a part of the majority, and sometimes I can be in places where I am the majority. So it's a very interesting relation. And how does our judgment of things and prejudging mentality go with us and help us get over things? Like, if you are out in the evening and you can see some dark alley and with some young roots who are standing there smoking or making noises, and you are walking there with your beautiful handsome lady, and instantly, and because you have this prejudgment of how things are, you avoid that alley, don't you? Or you would like to, if you can, if your car isn't parked in there. And so you say, well, let's go that road, shouldn't we, honey? Let's take that other side of the road or something like that, unless you want to get into a fight, you think. But then you can be very surprised that these people are maybe roots, and they are not really as you think they are, but they are not the criminals you are expecting either. So when you walk on the other side of the road and you really get attacked by by a thief who actually looks very much normal and who you think is not a thief. You have this picture in your head of this person coming up toward you. Oh, he looks presentable and she looks good. That's no problem. But they are the thieves, and they take your purse and hit you and run away. And so these roots standing in there smoking, whom you've been avoiding, comes to your aid and runs after her and gets the purse. And so your world is shaken upside down because of that misunderstanding you have been having in your head. But is it really a misunderstanding? It's just a structure in your brain and in your life about who is what and where is good and where is not. And that's how we go about being in life and acting in life. Otherwise, we would freeze at every second. So when I meet a policeman, I immediately trust that he is from the law and order. And I open the window and talk to him unless I have something to hide and I want to run away. But otherwise, I will meet him with trust. And here comes on the other side this falafel seller or the person who's on the fish market with his dirty clothes and Turkish or Italian or Greek accent coming towards you with a half what can you say, unsettled hair and dirty clothes, and you really don't want to roll the window down. And if you do, you are really disgusted already, and you are really aware, and you are like reacting before he comes to tell you what he wants. Why is that? It's because you have a picture of this guy is maybe trouble, but it doesn't need to be. This is maybe the most nice and hard-working and cute guy you can ever find on the street out there, while you see that other guy walking in that business suit and smiling very freshly with his mustache, or not mustache, when you say you're a friseur, and beautiful cologne and everything on him shows you, oh, this is civilization, this is good. But he is a big shark, a big monster. Been treating his girlfriend badly, as a narcissist with a big N, really egoistic, and going about cheating people with his cleverness, smartness, and putting people into misery. And that's what sociology gives you tools to try and understand. Why is it I prejudge something, and what makes me do that? And it's not a dig into the psychology of it. It's not what you are inside you. It's just why you use it as a tool to get by in life. And sociology is, you can say, a kind of observation of everyday life with a special tool and technique of observation, so you can put yourself out of it. Meanwhile, you're looking into it to understand it on its own premises. You want to understand how things work without your judgment and without your interpretation. And it goes as the same for anthropology. When people go around and look into cultures and meet people from different places on the earth, these anthropologists, as they call them, that means the human science, the science of how human nature is. And they go digging sometimes with archaeologists who want to see things from history. And so they come to these conclusions of this tribe has this and these notions, and they think in this and that way, and they make all these observations. The same goes for sociology, but sociology is not interested in the human origin and nature. It's not where do you come from, it's how you are right now, and how does it go for you when you are like, okay, here's an African, and he's in the mid-50s, in his age, he has a family of 5, and he works in that place, and we are in the time before the civil rights movement got hold in the United States and the rights became different. And so how does he go about his life, and what happens to him, and how do he meet the social structures, how do they meet him, and what kind of relations do he have, and how does that affect him in his life, on his health, on his economy, on his way of life. And the same study can be made 40 years later, where the Afro-Americans have gotten hold on their rights in society and got a president, and are very, very different from that guy before that time. And so they go on and study the same issues, comparing how things have changed and what kind of effect and impact it has had on these people. This is also part of what sociology is about. All this is my explanation, of course, and as usual, it's a read into the book and not Slavic interpretation and reading of the book. So it is looking into the common sense, the thing that is very well known to everyone, trying to understand how they are connected in a relation, in a network of a kind, in a formation. And so these words will get back to us, and how the actors in them are bound or free in their role. So the word, the phrase roles, and being in a role in society is also part of what is needed to be understood in this sociological manner. So sociology is that we live with other people, interact with each other, and thus interaction is what we like to understand, because it's a lot of silent knowledge that we do not really understand and have been looking into. And sociology is also about giving you some answers. You also want to understand and get answers. And maybe that can lead to changes. So it's also an active way of trying to influence changes, not by taking part already ahead. It's apolitical. That's the problem with sociology, that many people see it as apolitical. It is not really trying to have a presumption of how politics and economics should run, but when they study the effects and try to observe them on their own premises, if it's possible, it's not easy always at all. And so when they do that, like studying a group of people living in a special area, let's say the Romas, and what happens to them when they are in these relations and areas. And so in that way, as that study can be taken to the policymakers who can maybe make some changes. So that's the idea of sociology as well. It wants to influence the change, but it doesn't do it, hopefully, by being presumptuous about it, but by observing it and seeing its effects and putting forward its results on their own promises, maybe with some interpretation or some kind of recommendations. And that has gone wrong also at some parts, but this is not what I want to talk about, because these sciences have sometimes also been implied and what can you say, paid for, so they can give certain type of recommendations or results, not by being corrupt, maybe sometimes corrupt, but indirectly, and that makes them also dependent on some other things. But if we understand it in a simple way, it is like studying, let's say, a workforce in a fabric, and the boss tells you, you can look into this, observe everything, and I want to understand how I can effectivize this workforce and what's wrong with them when they go home. Why are some of them sick, and why do some of them show up late, and why do they make these mistakes during the day, and how long can they keep their focus, and what is occupying them, and so on. And so you go in and study that, and that becomes a field between sociology and psychology, of course. But if you go in and study that workforce, where they live, where they come from, what interests they have, and you get an understanding. Well, you have 20% of people living in this and that area. You have 10% who comes from very poor families, other 10% who have maybe had a criminal record. You have 2% who are elderly, 70% younger. So you get a picture of who is working in your place and where they come from and what interests they have, what kind of food and culture is surrounding them. This is also part of what sociology does, and it must emphasize that it is apolitical. And that's why sometimes they don't like it, because it gives results that is different from what they want to hear. So that maybe that owner of that fabric wants to hear that everything is fine and the people are good and they come all from acceptable background. But then he finds out it's not like that. And he wants to hear that, well, they are happy with their work, but he finds out that they're maybe not so happy as they seem. And again, trying to be objective in these manners and answering the questions on their own premises. And that can be difficult to do and can be difficult to live up to. And this is what also is something this book is aware of. At the same time, sociology is a kind of getting over that common sense and opening new possibilities. So it can also be seen in a positive light, that it is not only about giving us the trouble and showing us how things are running bad, but it can also like show us the potentials in some of the things that's happening. So when you meet a group of migrants and you see how they settle down and how they go about their life and the success they have in that, in those networks and relations, you can see that this is a model that can be used for somebody else who had not had the same success, and maybe presented as an observation of how some people can make use of their life as new migrants in a new country despite the challenges that there are. Sociology really not worships but values the individuality of everyone, but it's not a theory about individuality. It takes its outspring in the individual. So because the individual is the building block of every society, and the individual's actions, the language and the actions and the experiences, these are the three things that makes the individual acting together with others in a kind of networks, groups, organized way. And so the individual will always be that building block that's very important for sociology, because it's the part of the sum. But sociology also recognizes that the part of the sum, when they go together, they become more than the sum. So if you are alone and then you become two, and these two persons live together, something happens more than the sum of these two. And if they get kids in the household and they start making their culture visible and how they go about living together, then these new persons in that relation becomes more than the part of the sum of the 2 or 4 or 5 persons who are in the household. And so they also look into, well, if you are just 1 and you become 2, is that the same if you are 1 and you suddenly are 7? If you have 2 kids, will the dynamics of your relation and integration and work together and laws and regulations that you will make in that house, will they be the same as if you have had 10 kids? Would that affect your life, the quality of life? Some would say already now, yes, common sense tells us it will affect the life and quality of life, but that's not necessarily so. And so sociology is about telling us what happens when people meet and interact, and what qualities or lack of qualities comes out of those networks of social relations. So to sum up all this, sociology is about looking and observing into the human interaction with other humans in a network that becomes organized or not so organized, and gets its own rules, policies, culture, way of doing things, and what happens in those relations, networks, structures. And it goes all the way from the small household and all the way up to big corporates and big nations. And that can be more difficult, of course, to realize any study of. Sociology is about looking into humans, but with a certain observation technique. Not only, as I said, going into a place and getting out and saying, now I know who they are. That's a lot of you speaking there, and not these people on their own conditions. And sociology is very much aware of understanding these differences and applying them in their technique. And it's also about showing how things are working, whether the people who apply sociology like it or not. It has to look the harsh truth in the face as much as it can. That's with all sciences. And just tell us how the results show things are going. And then we can doubt these results, or maybe think they are not really, we are not able to generalize out of them because they are not viable and they are not liable. And these are two keywords in statistics and sociological studies, that things has to be viable and liable. So the validation of things has to make them valuable. It's like you can use them, you can validate what you are seeking to know. And liable, it means you can depend on them. You are not missing anything, or what you're looking into is representative for everything, and who can be sure of that? And so there are many sides to sociology that are very interesting and can become complicated, but it is basically to look into the human network of relations as they unfold and become structures, because it's the human activity that is the thing we are following and trying to look into, and the effects of it when you are with others and you become a group, and the group becomes a bigger group and becomes a majority, and in it a minority, and it has a culture, maybe subcultures, and it go about making rules and laws and ideas and defining themselves by these ideas. So we are also going in and out history, sociology, psychology, anthropology, the study of state and politics and economics. So it's like a flower where sociology can go out and look into all these parts of the flower core, but it goes back to its field of study all the way back to tell us what it is. And so this was a long but hopefully good introduction. I hope someone would have enjoyed it or liked it or helped on the way to understand parts of what sociology is all about, maybe just for fun. At least for me, I like it, and I like using my time on this. Thank you, and I will go on with part 1 about action, identity, and how to understand things in daily life.